My wife left me for a CEO, but I took his billion-dollar company.
I was driving my old pickup home, the Nebraska sky heavy and gray, 3 months before Christmas, when my peaceful life exploded without a sound. It wasn't a sudden crash. It was a hairline fracture in reality, visible only to me, instantly shattering 8 years of shared simplicity. I had just finished my shift at the supermarket, the smell of produce and stale coffee still clinging to my uniform. I stopped at the intersection near the Slade Energy headquarters, and then I saw her. Athena. She walked out of the towering glass structure, not in the functional business attire she usually wore, but in a tight dress that hugged her stunning figure, her long, silky hair dancing slightly in the cold wind. My chest tightened immediately. Something was off. She wasn't walking toward the bus stop or calling a rideshare. She walked straight toward a gleaming, intimidatingly black Mercedes sedan parked discreetly near the entrance, the kind of car reserved for men who didn't worry about utility bills or the price of gas. The passenger door opened, and Athena smiled, a brilliant, dazzling smile, but one I realized I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She slid effortlessly into the seat, disappearing into the plush leather interior next to the driver. I recognized him instantly, and the name punched the air out of my lungs. Griffin Slade, 32, CEO of Slade Energy, son of the founder, and the man Athena had spoken about with hushed, almost worshipful admiration every night for the past year. Griffin is so brilliant, Tyler. He guided the company through the oil crisis without laying off a single person. I had foolishly dismissed it as professional respect, a clerk admiring ambition. Now, watching her sit beside him in that luxurious cage, my heart clenched and squeezed until it felt brittle. I fought the wave of nausea and fear that threatened to overwhelm me right there in the driver's seat of my worn-out truck. Maybe, I desperately reasoned, maybe she just got a ride because of a late meeting. Maybe they were discussing a complicated business deal that required traveling in separate cars later. But the image of her radiant smile, the way she settled into that expensive passenger seat as if she belonged there, was a cruel, icy certainty that whispered a far darker truth. I drove home in a fog, the familiar streets of Omaha blurring through the windshield. That night I tried to act normal, holding Elise, my 2-year-old daughter, watching her happily scribble messy crayon lines on the newspaper. I tried to talk to Athena about my day, about the new shipment of frozen peas, but she was distant, tapping secrets into her phone under the cover of the couch cushions. The secretive phone calls started immediately after that afternoon. She would excuse herself to the bedroom or the cold, creaking hallway, whispering and giggling into the phone, her voice light and musical, a tune she hadn't played for me in years. "It's just work, Tyler. Deadlines," she'd insist, eyes avoiding mine, a thin, clumsy lie draped over a mountain of deceit. She began coming home later, 8, 9, sometimes past midnight. I had to stay for a deadline, she'd claim, her breath faintly carrying the scent of unfamiliar expensive cologne that wasn't mine, and definitely wasn't the smell of an oil company headquarters. I would lie awake beside her, listening to her steady, rhythmic breathing, battling the terrifying suspicion that I was imagining things. We had a life, a small, quiet, imperfect life, but it was ours. We had Elise. Athena would never betray me. I clung to that fragile belief, a thread of denial stretched taut over an abyss of doubt. I didn't want a mansion. I didn't need a luxury car. I only needed my family, and the terrifying realization that I was losing the only thing I truly cherished began to consume me, twisting my gentle nature into a knot of anxiety and fear. I knew with the cold certainty of a Nebraska winter that the foundation of peace I had built was silently crumbling beneath me, and I was utterly helpless to stop it. The subtle cracks in our life quickly widened into gaping chasms that I could no longer ignore, transforming my quiet anxiety into a searing, unbearable pain. 2 weeks before Christmas, the flimsy thread of my belief in Athena snapped entirely. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. Athena texted me around 5 p.m. that she had a crucial year-end report due and would be working late, maybe past midnight. I replied with a simple, "Stay warm, eat something," and finished my shift, stocking the last of the canned vegetables with a practiced, weary smile. Driving home, the rain was relentless, heavy drops hammering against the roof of my old pickup. As I passed the luxury hotel downtown, the rain-slicked streets reflecting the golden glow of the city lights, I spotted Griffin Slade's distinctive black Mercedes parked under the covered entrance of the hotel valet. My heart immediately slammed against my ribs. I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty that bypassed my rational mind, that this wasn't coincidence. I pulled my truck over discreetly a block away, killed the engine, and waited in the darkness and the pouring rain, adrenaline masking the exhaustion of the day. 5 minutes later felt like an eternity compressed into agonizing anticipation. And then I saw them. Athena walked out of the brightly lit lobby entrance, hand in hand with Griffin, under the warm golden awning. Her hair was slightly tousled, perhaps from the rain, perhaps from something else, but her face wasn't tired or stressed from a deadline. It radiated a relief and pure, unburdened happiness that I realized she had not shared with me for years. It was the glow of someone who had just shed a heavy burden, and that burden, I knew with devastating clarity, was me. Griffin slipped an arm casually around her waist, whispered something into her ear, and Athena laughed, a full, clear sound that stabbed through the rainy night air. Then they stopped right there under the awning, and they kissed. It wasn't a quick peck. It was lingering, possessive, undeniable. Rain or tears, I couldn't tell what blurred my vision as I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. It felt like all the air had been violently sucked from my lungs, leaving only a hollow, aching emptiness in my chest. Athena, the woman I loved, the mother of my child, stood in the arms of another man, a man whose existence represented everything she claimed to disdain about the corporate world, as if our shared 8 years, our promises and our daughter had never even been real. I waited for her that night. Elise was asleep, curled in her crib, the crayon scribbles on the wall, the masterpieces of my world, now painful, mocking reminders of the joy that was slipping away. The house was cold and silent when the door finally opened around 1 a.m. Athena walked in, shaking the residual rain from her coat, carrying that faint, telltale scent of Griffin's unfamiliar, expensive cologne. I stood up immediately, the shock replaced by a terrible, cold resolve. "Athena, you were with him, weren't you?" Griffin Slade. She froze mid-movement, her expression shifting from mild relief to cold, controlled annoyance. She turned slowly, her sharp green eyes fixed on me. Devoid of warmth or regret, I stepped closer, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "Why? Why don't the past 8 years mean anything to you? Elise is sleeping in there. Do you even think about our daughter?" Athena didn't flinch. She spoke calmly, deliberately, as if reading a prepared legal statement or a final devastating verdict. "I don't love you anymore, Tyler. I haven't for a long time. I don't need you, and I don't need this life." My heart dropped to the floor, the sudden, overwhelming shock eclipsing the rage. "I found the only future I want," she continued, her voice flat, emotionless. I collapsed to my knees, not from weakness, but because the foundational structure of my existence had just given way. "Athena, please, think of Elise. We can fix this. We can talk." She looked down at me, kneeling on the worn wooden floor, with a look of pure, cutting contempt that chilled me to the bone. "You're not worth staying for. This marriage has been a burden, Tyler. You're just a supermarket clerk. I deserve someone better." In that moment, watching the woman I loved condemn me with such vicious certainty, I understood. The person standing before me was a stranger, and my family was truly irrevocably over. The quiet, gentle man I was died on that cold, unforgiving floor. The finality of her departure was swift, brutal, and completely lacking in human decency. 2 days before Christmas, Athena packed the remnants of her life and left our small, weathered house. She didn't leave a note, she didn't call, and most unforgivably, she didn't say goodbye to Elise. I came home from work to a hollow, terrifying silence that echoed in the empty spaces where her presence used to be. On the kitchen table, cold and impersonal, lay divorce papers next to her wedding ring, tossed carelessly on the wood like a piece of discarded metal. It was a cold, final message. I stared at the ring, the symbol of 8 years of sacrifice and love, now meaningless. My phone buzzed, cutting through the silence. An email notification sent to the shared family account, the one I usually checked for grocery coupons, stopped my breathing entirely. Passenger Athena Beckett has checked in online. Flight from Houston to Paris. Paris, the city we had dreamed of visiting on our honeymoon, the trip we could never afford, was now someone else's paradise, and she had flown there with Griffin Slade. The betrayal was complete, absolute. leaving me with nothing but the paralyzing vacuum of abandonment and the responsibility of raising a 2-year-old daughter alone. Christmas night arrived, silent and unforgiving. Outside, a thick blanket of snow muffled the world, transforming the neighborhood into a picturesque, cruel postcard. Laughter and warmth echoed from the neighbors' houses, their twinkling lights mocking my solitary despair. I sat under the dim yellow light of our living room, holding a sleeping Elise in my arms. She was curled tight against me, her tiny hand clutching the fabric of my shirt, blissfully unaware that her mother had chosen luxury and ambition over her. I fought the overwhelming feeling of being utterly forsaken, the pain crashing over me in relentless waves. "We'll be okay, sweetheart," I whispered into her soft hair, but the voice that emerged was hollow and unrecognizable. The wind howled outside, a desolate sound that mirrored the emptiness inside my soul. I felt like the loneliest man on earth, grieving not just a wife, but the total annihilation of the life I had built. Then a knock at the door, soft but clear, pierced the silence. My heart skipped, a tiny foolish spark of hope igniting in my chest. Could it be Athena, coming back, realizing her mistake? Even as the thought formed, I knew it was impossible. I stood, carefully shifting Elise in my arms, and walked to the door, pulling it open. The cold wind rushed in, carrying flakes of snow. Standing on my porch, silhouetted against the white night, was an old man, dignified and commanding, with silver hair and eyes as sharp and unwavering as steel. He wore an expensive, long coat and stood tall, radiating an authority that felt completely out of place in my humble rental home. He spoke, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, yet carrying an undeniable weight of command. "Tyler Beckett, my son, I have been searching for you for 35 years. I stood frozen, shock instantly replacing grief. I tried to pull myself together, taking a ragged breath, but my voice still shook when I finally managed to speak. You must have the wrong person. I am Tyler Beckett, but I'm not your son. You've got the wrong house." My words sounded weak, a desperate plea for this bizarre intrusion to end. But the old man's eyes, unwavering and piercing, cut me off mid-sentence. They were not the eyes of a scammer or a madman. They were deep, brimming with emotion and a profound, chilling certainty. He answered, his voice low, warm, yet shaking with feeling. "No, son, I am not mistaken. Let me come inside. I will explain everything. It will only take a few minutes, and I promise I will leave if you want me to." His request was polite, but the authority in his tone was absolute. I hesitated, suspicion warring with a sudden, intense curiosity. I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Fine, come in, but keep it short, and don't wake my daughter." He walked in with a steady stride, and once we were seated, he introduced himself formally, clearing his throat. "I am Randolph Slade, chairman of Slade Energy." The name hit me like a physical blow. Slade Energy, the company where Athena worked, the company run by Griffin, the man who stole my wife. "Mr. Slade," I began, trying to maintain control, "why on earth do you think I am your son? This must be a mistake. I have parents. I have a life." Randolph looked at me for a long time, patient yet carrying an ancient pain, and started telling the story of Eleanor, the love of his life, my birth mother, and a life I never knew existed, plunging me into a nightmare of inherited secrets. Randolph Slade's voice filled the small living room, heavy with suppressed grief and a story so vast it threatened to swallow my reality whole. He spoke of Eleanor, my birth mother, who died giving birth to me 35 years ago, leaving him with an irreparable void. He described her with heartbreaking tenderness, her beauty, her brilliance, and the fact that she had the same green eyes I did. That detail froze me. Green eyes. I had always wondered why I looked so different from Wayne and Patricia, my adoptive parents, who always dismissed it by saying I took after distant relatives. Every buried doubt I had ever harbored resurfaced violently. Randolph continued, his voice dropping low, laden with guilt. He recounted my early days in the Slade mansion, surrounded by nannies and wealth. He then described his gravest error, remarrying a woman named Alia, who was ambitious, ruthless, and pathologically jealous of me, the true heir. She wanted her own son, Griffin, the same Griffin who took Athena, to be the only successor. The connection, the sickening web of coincidence made my mind spin. Griffin was my half-brother. I recoiled, shaking my head violently. "Stop, Mr. Slade. This is insane." But he didn't stop. He pressed on, the narrative growing heavier, darker. Then you disappeared, Tyler. Kidnapped in the middle of the night while I was away at a company meeting. I nearly lost my mind. I searched for years, poured millions into it. Every lead ended in a dead end. Every single night I lay awake wondering where you were. My heart was pounding. Fear and disbelief spiraling into chaos. His story was impossibly detailed, agonizingly real, yet it couldn't possibly be about me. Randolph took a deep breath, his voice catching. What finally led me to you was the scandal surrounding Griffin's affair. My team was investigating everyone around him to protect the family name. And that's when they found Athena, a woman clearly driven by money and status, and then they found your file, Tyler. An ordinary man working at a supermarket in Nebraska, but the details matched too perfectly. Birth date, physical traits, even a small scar on your hand I remembered from when you were 2. The mention of Athena, the immediate sickening relevance of her betrayal to this grand, terrible family secret, hit me like a punch. Randolph concluded with the final horrifying detail. Deeper digging revealed that my late wife, Alia, had orchestrated the kidnapping herself. She secretly handed you to a couple, Wayne and Patricia Beckett, to raise in exchange for money and absolute silence. The revelation exploded in the tiny room. I jumped up, pointing at him, rage surging beneath the terror. You're making this up. How dare you take advantage of my pain? My wife just left me. I'm heartbroken, and you show up with a fairy tale. Get out. Randolph didn't flinch. He remained perfectly calm. Reaching into his coat pocket, he pulled out an old creased photograph, a picture of a chubby 2-year-old boy with startlingly familiar green eyes and a wide, gap-toothed grin. I went still. That face was identical to the baby photos in my adoptive parents' worn album, photos they always claimed were of me. This is you, Tyler, taken at the Slade estate before you disappeared. My hands shook as I took the photo. Then he produced a sheet of paper. Recent DNA test results, secretly run from a sample he took from a coffee cup I had used near the supermarket. Randolph Slade and Tyler Beckett, 99% match. I stared at the photo, then the report, my head spinning, the truth flooding my consciousness like a catastrophic wave. My parents, Wayne and Patricia, were liars. I was the kidnapped son of a billionaire. Athena left me for my own half-brother, Griffin. Everything I thought I knew was shattered. I can't process this, I whispered, my voice breaking. I need time. Please leave me alone. Randolph nodded, standing gently and placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. I understand, son. When you're ready, call me. He left his card and walked out into the snowy night, leaving me alone in the terrifying silence, clutching a photo and a DNA report that had fundamentally rewritten my entire life story. I sat there, utterly shattered, knowing that my loneliness had just been replaced by a secret so profound it would change the course of my future forever. The night bled into morning without granting me a moment of sleep. I lay awake in the small, dark room, the faint glow of the streetlights casting strange, elongated shadows on the walls. The faces, Randolph's sorrowful eyes, Eleanor's gentle memory, Griffin's arrogant smirk, and Alia's vicious jealousy spun in my mind like a violent storm. My adoptive parents, Wayne and Patricia, suddenly recast as paid kidnappers. They raised me, drove me to school, taught me how to ride a bike. How could they have done it all for money? Fragmented memories rushed back. The way they always skirted questions about my earliest years, the sparsity of my baby photos, the vague, persistent feeling of disconnection I had always dismissed as my imagination. I buried my face in the pillow, tears soaking the fabric. The breathing of Elise in her crib nearby was the only tether holding me to reality, the single precious truth left in my ruined world. By morning I was exhausted, heavy-headed, but gripped by a desperate need for confirmation. I couldn't live another hour suspended between Randolph's unbelievable truth and the painful lie that had been my life. I picked up Randolph's elegant business card, my hand shaking violently, and dialed the number. 2 rings, and his deep, warm voice answered, "Tyler, you called?" I took a deep, unsteady breath. "Mr. Slade, Randolph, I need to see my parents. I need them to confirm it themselves. I want you to come with me. If you're telling the truth, they'll break." There was a brief silence on the line, then simply, "I understand. I'll pick you up right away. No more questions." I dressed Elise, dropped her off with a worried Mrs. Mary, and less than half an hour later, a gleaming black limousine, smelling of rich leather and expensive cologne, pulled up to my modest curb. Randolph stepped out, dressed in an immaculate suit, powerful yet weary. He opened the back door. "Get in, son, we're going to the old town." The drive was tense, silent save for the hum of the luxury engine. I stared out the window, watching the familiar landscape flash by. When the car turned onto the road leading to Wayne and Patricia's weathered wooden house, my heart began to race uncontrollably. It looked exactly the same. Moss on the roof, overgrown yard, the faint smell of wood smoke hanging in the air. I swallowed hard and stepped out, Randolph a shadow of silent support behind me. Wayne and Patricia froze when they saw us. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Wayne reading the paper, Patricia knitting. Surprise quickly curdled into apprehension. "Tyler, what are you doing here? Who is this?" Wayne demanded, standing, his hands already shaking. "We need to talk," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. We sat at the old wooden table. The air felt suffocatingly heavy. I asked the single question that held the key to my past. "Mom, Dad, am I really your biological son, or was I adopted?" The question landed like a physical blow. Wayne's face instantly turned crimson. He shot to his feet, overturning his chair with a crash, and roared. "What the hell are you talking about, Tyler? You're my son, born right here." But the panic in his eyes belied the furious shouting. Patricia began to weep immediately, pulling a tissue from her sleeve. "You dare question everything we sacrificed for you? We gave up so much to raise you, and now you come here accusing us." My chest tightened, the truth becoming unavoidable. Randolph, who had been silent, spoke now, his voice low, ice-cold, and utterly commanding. "I am Randolph Slade, Tyler's biological father, and I have proof that you two have concealed my son's kidnapping for 35 years. They instantly turned their fury on him. "You're a lunatic! Get out!" Wayne screamed. Randolph calmly placed the DNA report and the old photograph on the table. "This is DNA proof. If you do not tell the truth, I will call the police right now for aiding and abetting a felony. You will face prison." The threat broke them. Wayne fell back into his chair, utterly defeated, clutching his chest. Patricia sobbed uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking. They looked at each other, and then at me. The 35-year-old's secret finally ripped into the light. Wayne slumped forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Fine, we confess. We took money from Athena Slade. She paid us a large sum to take the child far away and raise him as our own. In exchange, absolute silence." Patricia nodded, trembling, unable to meet my eyes. "You're not our biological son, Tyler. You were brought to us when you were 2. I crumbled, my entire childhood shattering into millions of sharp, painful pieces. "Why? Why did you do this?" I choked, tears streaming. They could only hang their heads. Randolph gently guided me away. Outside, walking toward the limousine, the wind cut like knives, but my heart was colder still. On the drive home, memories flooded back, the realization that every cold dismissal, every harsh word, every birthday without a real gift wasn't due to poverty. It was indifference. I was never their son. I was a commodity they raised for money. What is truly unforgivable? The ambitious betrayal of a spouse or the calculated deception of a child by those who claim to be parents? Share your thoughts on who bears the great immoral failing in the comments below. I stared out the window, knowing that the storm was far from over, but at least I now knew the truth, a terrible truth purchased at the cost of my entire past. The shift in my life was immediate and jarring. Randolph refused to let Elise and me stay in the compromised rental apartment for another second. Within days, he moved us into a spectacular modern high-rise apartment in downtown Omaha. It was bright, immaculate, and spacious, featuring glass elevators and a breathtaking view of the Platte River. "This is your new home, Tyler. You and my granddaughter deserve to live properly," he said, his voice warm with protective affection. Elise immediately embraced the freedom, happily scribbling on the pristine white walls with crayons, knowing there was no scolding to follow. I sank into the plush leather sofa, still slightly dizzy from the speed of the change, feeling a physical lightness, as if the weight of decades of deceit had finally been lifted. Yet the contemptuous stares from the Slade family gathering still burned in my memory, and I knew Ailey and Griffin were actively plotting their next move. The tension was an ever-present hum beneath the veneer of luxury. Randolph insisted I start at Slade Energy, but not as a favored heir. You need to climb from the ground up, Tyler. No leaning on me, he stated firmly. My new position, administrative assistant in the logistics department, the lowest rung on the corporate ladder. For a man whose daily routine involved stocking shelves and sweeping aisles, the corporate world was an alien universe. Slade Energy headquarters was a towering glass skyscraper, an environment of marble floors, high-speed elevators, and fiercely competitive, sharply dressed employees. I wore the new suit Randolph bought me, clutching a leather briefcase, heart hammering with anxiety as I walked in. My first days were a nightmare of professional disorientation. Meetings were a barrage of incomprehensible jargon. Fracking, upstream operations, barrels per day. The workload was crushing, hundreds of emails, reports due yesterday, all moving at a speed that left me breathless. I sat at my desk, staring at screens full of charts I didn't understand, terrified I would fail and immediately prove Griffin's sneering insults correct, that I was nothing but a mediocre supermarket clerk who didn't belong. The corporate culture was brutal, demanding 12-hour days and offering zero tolerance for error. I went home every night physically and mentally exhausted, holding Elise as I fell asleep, still running oil market analyses in my head. But I refused to give up. I stayed late, arriving before dawn, filling notebooks with industry terms, reading dense books Randolph quietly provided, and catching up through his patient late-night phone explanations on supply chain optimization. My stubbornness began to pay off. Within 2 weeks, I was handling emails faster, offering small, accurate suggestions in meetings, and even catching minor mistakes others had missed. Colleagues started looking at me differently, curiosity turning to grudging respect. "Tyler, you learned fast," my boss Mark admitted one afternoon. But Alia and Griffin were not idle spectators. They responded to my success with sabotage, often disguised as difficult assignments. I was deliberately tasked with impossible deadlines, complex senior-level reports, and analyses of new oil field supply chains that should have taken weeks, not days. "Orders from above," Mark would say, avoiding my gaze, confirming Griffin's direct involvement. Files would suddenly vanish right before presentations. In one meeting, after I had stayed up all night preparing slides on logistics optimization, the file was remotely deleted. Griffin sat at the head of the table, a smug half-smirk playing on his lips. "Tyler, not ready. Maybe let someone else handle it." Oh, laughter rippled through the room. I stood there, burning with humiliation, but salvaged the situation by improvising from my frantic handwritten notes. Alia, joining via video, delivered the final biting blow. "Very amateur, Tyler. We need experts, not hobbyists." I bit my tongue, refusing to retaliate. Athena, wanting to maintain her status in Griffin's world, became an active participant in my character assassination, spreading distorted versions of our past within the company, that I was lazy, unambitious, and deserved to be left. Despite the internal war, I persisted. I recovered deleted data, monitored my email for hacks, and practiced presentations until I was fluent in the language of oil. I solved problems myself, refusing to run to Randolph for protection. With every victory, however small, I gained skills, confidence, and quiet allies within the company. Randolph, watching from a distance, called me to his private office one day, smiling. "Son, I'm proud of you. You're changing everything." His approval was deeply moving. But the more ground I gained, the more threatened Alia and Griffin felt. Their contemptuous stares crystallized into pure, dangerous hatred. I knew the higher I climbed, the bigger target I became, completely unaware that a much more devastating trap was already being set. The constant low-level pressure I faced at work and the subtle hostility of the Slade family were quickly replaced by a palpable, physical danger. The anonymous letters began shortly after Randolph publicly declared me the heir. The first one, a plain white envelope shoved under my door, contained a chilling typewritten message. "Leave Randolph immediately. Don't even dream of entering the Slade family or you'll die." My heart pounded against my ribs. I tried to dismiss it as a sick prank, but the letters kept coming, sometimes taped to my new expensive car, always carrying the same icy malice. "The Slade family isn't for trash like you. Back off before it's too late." Sleep became a distant luxury. I lay awake, checking the locks multiple times, imagining shadowy figures outside the glass high-rise windows. The threats soon escalated beyond paper. Unknown numbers called day and night. I would answer the phone at midnight, my heart hammering, only to hear heavy, deliberate breathing on the other end, slow and savoring my fear. Sometimes a distorted robotic voice would whisper, "Who do you think you are? Slade is not your name. Disappear or your daughter pays." That icy implication, the mention of Elise, sent paralyzing waves of terror through me. I kept a knife under my pillow, jumping at every hallway noise, clutching Elise tighter every time she stirred, terrified she would be dragged into this venomous, billion-dollar family war. Then the media tidal wave hit, orchestrated with brutal precision. A headline in the Nebraska Daily screamed, "Imposter claiming to be Slade Energy billionaire's son. Scam or truth?" The article, clearly fed by Elia's sources, painted me as a gold digger exploiting Randolph's grief and old age. They dredged up my past, supermarket photos, quotes from Wayne and Patricia, who under pressure from Elia were now claiming, "He's greedy. He abandoned the family that raised him." Blogs exploded with the narrative of fake Tyler Slade billionaire family conned by a broke nobody. I knew this was a coordinated media assault, a sophisticated attack designed to isolate and delegitimize me before I could solidify my place. Life became hell. Neighbors stared, co-workers whispered, and even kind Mrs. Mary, who watched Elise, began looking at me with suspicion. The isolation was crushing. I came home every night and sat in the dark, wrestling with the overwhelming urge to simply disappear, to take Elise and go back to quiet obscurity just to make the threats stop. Randolph repeatedly called, his voice full of worry. "Tyler, let me put you and Elise under protection, a secure estate. It is not safe for the little one." But I kept hesitating. I was afraid that accepting total protection would mean finally surrendering the gentle, ordinary Tyler Beckett I still clung to, replacing him entirely with the target Elia and Griffin saw. "I need time, Dad," I repeated wearily. But one night, watching Elise sleep, her innocent, trusting face illuminated by the streetlight, I realized my hesitation was cowardice. If I kept retreating, the threats would turn into action. Elise did not deserve to live in fear. The next morning I called Randolph. My voice was firm, resolute. "Dad, I'm ready. Not for the name or the money, but because I need to protect Elise. I won't live in fear another minute." Randolph's relief was palpable. "My son." I've waited so long to hear those words. He vowed protection and promised to bring me back into the Slade family openly and honorably. "I will tell the world, Tyler. You are my legitimate heir. No one will dare touch you again." The same day, Randolph held a massive press conference. I watched on TV as he stood before a wall of flashing cameras. "Today I announce that Tyler Beckett is my biological son, kidnapped 35 years ago. DNA has proven it, and he is the rightful heir to Slade Energy." The news shook the state, but I knew this was only the beginning. Randolph warned me. A grand family gathering was scheduled weeks away at the main estate, the day I would officially appear before the entire dynasty. "You must be strong, Tyler. They will test you." I nodded, anxiety churning. Griffin and Elia would surely be plotting something monumental, something designed to humiliate or destroy me entirely. The storm was visible now, right on the horizon. The storm broke with a terrifying suddenness that eclipsed all the letters, calls, and media attacks combined. Life in the new, upscale apartment had settled into a cautious rhythm, defined by early mornings at Slade Energy and late evenings with Elise. But the feeling of being watched never left. The tension I had tried to manage finally peaked late one evening. I came home exhausted from work, Elise clinging to my leg, begging for ice cream. The hallway of our floor was pitch black. The overhead light was out. As I fumbled with the key, heavy footsteps echoed from the elevator. I turned, and my blood ran cold. Elia Slade stood there, radiating menace, wearing a luxurious fur coat, and flanked by several hulking, tattooed thugs, their arms covered in intimidating ink. They blocked the hallway, turning the air thick and electric with fear. Elia stepped forward, her voice low and cold as polished steel. "Tyler Beckett, or should I say fake Slade?" She sneered, unleashing a torrent of vicious insults, mocking my supermarket past and my attempt to climb into their world. "You're nothing but trash, a stain I tried to erase 35 years ago." The thugs laughed, one slamming his fist against the wall, making Elise jump and whimper. Alia delivered the final, devastating threat, her eyes flashing malice. "If you don't disappear from the Slades right now, you'll lose the thing you value most." Her implication was clear. Elise. I stood firm, shielding my daughter, my entire body shaking, but my voice firm. "Leave before I call the police." Alia simply laughed and walked away, her entourage melting back into the elevator, leaving the terrifying threat hanging in the air. That night's sleep was impossible. I stared at the ceiling, consumed by the certainty that Alia was targeting Elise. Every shadow, every sound made me jump. The next morning I went straight to Randolph's office, cancelled his meeting, and recounted Alia's appearance, the insults and the explicit threat. Randolph's face turned crimson with cold fury. "She dares!" He acted instantly, doubling security for Elise and me, hiring 24/7 bodyguards, and ordering private investigators to shadow Alia, vowing, "She will never touch you again." But Alia was already one step ahead. That afternoon, while I was finishing a crucial report at the office, my phone rang. Elise's bodyguard's voice was ragged with panic. "Mr. Beckett, she's gone. There was an attack. They bundled her into a black car and vanished." My world stopped. I bolted from the office, driving like a maniac to the daycare, tears blurring my vision. All that remained was an empty playground and scattered toys. Then the text message arrived, icy and short. "Want to see your daughter again? Disappear from the Slades, otherwise you'll never see her alive." That threat was the trigger that dissolved my last vestiges of composure. I collapsed onto the sidewalk, paralyzed by despair, my soul torn in two. Randolph arrived immediately, his face ashen, instantly mobilizing the entire Slade network, police, private investigators, hackers, and every high-level contact he possessed. We sat in the Slade Mansion conference room, giant screens displaying maps and data, teams searching every abandoned location in Omaha. But Elise was gone without a trace. I sat clutching her photo, tears streaming. "Dad, if I lose Elise, I can't go on." Randolph held me, his own eyes burning with fury and regret. In desperation, we stormed Alia's private mansion, bursting in with Randolph's bodyguards, demanding answers. Alia sat calmly drinking tea, feigning shock and amusement. "Kidnapping? I'm far too busy running the company for such nonsense. You're blinded by this stray you picked up." She mocked us, denying everything, and had her guards physically throw us out. Just as Randolph was about to spiral into despair and call his lawyers to initiate a massive legal assault, Griffin appeared at the main estate. He walked into the war room, pale, shaking, his eyes red and distraught. "Dad, Tyler, I know where Elise is." We froze. I grabbed his collar, adrenaline surging. "What did you say?" "Where?" Griffin broke down, confessing that he had overheard his mother planning the kidnapping, eavesdropping on her call to the thugs, and knew the specific abandoned house on the outskirts where Elise was being held. Alia, joining via video call, shrieked in disbelief. "Griffin, are you insane? I did this for you." But Griffin shook his head, weeping. "I only wanted to ruin Tyler, Mom. I never wanted to hurt a child. You went too far." I didn't wait another second. With Randolph's men, we raced to the address, an abandoned, dusty house outside Omaha. We stormed in, my heart about to explode. I found her in a back room, shaking, terrified, but thankfully unharmed, clutching her doll. I swept my daughter into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Baby daddy's here. I've got you." Elise clung to me, her small voice breaking the silence. Randolph stood behind us, watching the reunion, his eyes blazing with a mixture of overwhelming relief and righteous, cold fury at Alia's unforgivable cruelty. The immediate threat was gone, but the war had just begun. With Elise safely back in my arms, the immediate panic gave way to a singular, cold focus. Justice. Alia's cruelty had crossed an unpardonable line, and Randolph and I were relentless. The morning after the rescue, the Slade Mansion's conference room transformed into a tactical center. We immediately summoned Randolph's private investigation team, a group of meticulous professionals armed with laptops and forensic kits. We returned to the abandoned house and meticulously collected every scrap of evidence: fingerprints, hair fibers, shoe prints. The two captured thugs, Alia's hired muscle, quickly confessed under police interrogation, providing phone records and messages that traced the orders directly to Alia. I sat beside Randolph, watching the data unfold, heart hammering as investigators hacked into Alia's secret phone, revealing a message ordering, "Make it clean, no traces." Randolph slammed his fist on the table, his face a mask of iron determination. She will not escape this time. We worked day and night, powered by adrenaline and righteous rage. I transcribed witness statements, comparing the accounts of the daycare bodyguard and the thugs. Randolph mobilized his most powerful contacts, ensuring the police and district attorney's office were prepared for the scale of the case against the chairman and his wife. But we weren't just pursuing the current crime. Randolph directed his team to reopen the 35-year-old kidnapping files. He hired top forensic technology experts who recovered and restored old police reports from the Nebraska archives, the original records of my disappearance when I was 2, the bank transfers proving Alia had paid Wayne and Patricia Beckett. I spent hours poring over the documents, seeing faded photos of my 2-year-old self, reading barely legible witness statements, and most damningly, discovering old emails from Alia to a henchman ordering, "Take the boy far away." Absolute silence. My hands trembled holding the papers, the physical evidence of decades of my life stolen by one woman's vicious ambition. Randolph explained that Alia had been meticulous, but modern technology, combined with the sheer power of the Slade resources, had finally exposed the truth. The tension in those nights was suffocating. We were building a case, brick by agonizing brick, against a woman who was still fighting fiercely for her freedom and status. Father and son worked side by side, compiling hundreds of pages of ironclad proof against Alia for 2 separate counts of kidnapping, one historical, one current. We filled the mansion's conference room, the long table buried under documents, legal analyses, and forensic reports. Randolph was focused on the legal angles, a combination of evidence that would guarantee a life sentence. Griffin, pale and trembling with remorse, agreed to testify against his mother. "I'll tell everything, Dad. I owe Tyler this much." The dossier was finally complete, the proof undeniable. The news of Elise's kidnapping, followed by the suspicion pointed directly at Alia, erupted in the media. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire Slade's granddaughter kidnapped, dark hand inside the family." Alia fought back, holding her own press conference, claiming she was the victim of a conspiracy. "Tyler is an opportunist who orchestrated this drama to seize the inheritance. I am innocent." She rallied her remaining loyalists, trying desperately to frame me as a conniving fraud. Randolph refused to allow her final, desperate manipulation to succeed. He summoned the entire Slade family to the main mansion's grand meeting room, demanding they witness the truth firsthand. It was a rainy night, the mansion blazing with light, but the atmosphere inside heavy with dread. About 40 relatives filled the long table, every face tense, waiting. I stood next to Randolph, my heart pounding but resolute. Elise was safe at home with security. Randolph stood and commanded the attention of the room. "Tonight I reveal the truth about Alia." He presented the evidence of Elise's kidnapping. Crime scene photos, the thugs' confessions, the digital messages from Alia's phone. Whispers erupted, quickly followed by stunned silence. Then he presented the evidence from 35 years ago. The restored files, the bank transfers, the emails proving she engineered my original kidnapping. The family was aghast. Alia jumped up, shrieking denials. "Lies! Everything I did was to protect the family." Randolph and Tyler are twisting the facts. But this time, no one supported her. The evidence was too overwhelming. Griffin's moment came next. He rose slowly, confronting his mother. "Mom, you were cruel. You didn't just kidnap once. You did it twice, all for ambition and power. I don't want this anymore." Alia collapsed back into her chair, sobbing, realizing the depth of her betrayal. At that moment, the police entered the mansion to arrest her. Randolph had orchestrated the timing perfectly. She looked around, realizing she was utterly alone, before the handcuffs clicked shut. The trial was swift, the evidence irrefutable. Alia was sentenced to 32 years for 2 counts of kidnapping. I sat in the public gallery as the guilty verdict was read, feeling no joy, only the painful, heavy cost of absolute justice. I knew my life had finally turned a new, terrifying, and exhilarating page. The immediate aftermath of Alia's arrest and conviction was a whirlwind of necessary legal finalities. The media coverage was global, transforming the private tragedy of the Slade family into a sensational narrative of corporate crime and decades-old secrets. I was no longer merely the supermarket clerk or the fake heir. I was Tyler Slade, the victim-turned-triumphant heir. Though the title felt heavy and cumbersome, I felt neither triumphant nor vengeful, only relieved that Elise was safe and the nightmare was finally over. The trial of Wayne and Patricia Beckett followed, a painful necessity due to their role in aiding the original kidnapping. Randolph, despite my protests rooted in residual childhood loyalty, pressed charges. They received 2-year suspended sentences and community service. I visited them once before the sentencing. They were old and broken, ravaged not by prison time, but by the shame of their choices. I told them I forgave them, but the lie they had forced me to live ensured that the relationship could never be repaired. The past was paid for, but the scar remained. With Alia gone, the immediate tension in the Slade family dissolved, replaced by a profound and necessary period of healing. The entire family, stunned by the extent of Alia's malice, rallied around Randolph and me, offering apologies tinged with guilt and genuine attempts at reconciliation. Relatives who had once sneered at me now sought my company, recognizing the profound strength it took to endure what I had endured. The most critical reconciliation, however, was with Griffin. He was devastated by his mother's actions and riddled with self-hatred for his own complicity and blind ambition. He came to the office one morning, face pale and drawn, finding Randolph and me discussing logistics. He hesitated at the door, then spoke, his voice raw and trembling. "Tyler, Dad, I came to apologize to both of you for everything." The arrogance was completely stripped away. He confessed his blind jealousy, the hatred his mother had carefully cultivated in him, and the unforgivable nature of his actions, from stealing Athena to enabling the schemes against Elise. "I want to step down as CEO, leave the company and start my life over. I don't deserve this anymore," he choked out, tears finally spilling down his face. I stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder, the gesture feeling strangely natural. "Griffin, let the past stay in the past. Everyone makes wrong choices. What matters is how we stand up afterward. I want you to stay. Stay and help me build a better Slade family. We are brothers, same blood." My words stunned him. He broke down completely, hugging me fiercely, the gesture signaling not submission, but genuine gratitude. Randolph, watching his 2 sons finally embrace, pulled us both into a hug, tears rolling freely. "My sons, finally our family is whole again." We started over. Griffin stepped down as CEO, but he stayed on as a key advisor and executive, working alongside me, sharing his immense corporate knowledge and slowly rebuilding his integrity. He became a true brother, a partner in redefining the Slade legacy. Athena, my former wife, vanished completely from Nebraska. I heard rumors she tried to leverage her brief relationship with Griffin in Europe, but the scandal of Alia's arrest made her toxic to the corporate elite. She chose ambition over family, and the world rejected her. I no longer felt hatred, just a vague, distant regret. She chose a different path, and I chose Elise. The tension about her existence finally melted away. I focused entirely on my daughter and my future. My career at Slade Energy accelerated rapidly, fueled by sheer competence and the unwavering trust of my father. I didn't lean on his name, but on the ruthless work ethic I learned in the first harrowing months. I implemented transparent financial reporting, rooted out corruption that Alia had fostered, and most importantly shifted the company's focus towards sustainability and clean energy. I prioritized employee welfare, advocating for higher wages and better healthcare, principles born of my own life at the bottom of the economic ladder. The company thrived, the stock soared, and 2 years after the night Athena abandoned me, the board unanimously appointed me CEO of Slade Energy. Randolph stepped back completely, dedicating himself to his true passion, being a grandfather. I sat in the vast CEO chair, looking out over the city. A long, long road traveled from the back room of a Nebraska supermarket. I was now the head of the billion-dollar company, a position earned not through blood right, but through survival and strength. That Christmas, the Slade mansion glowed with warmth. The whole family was gathered, laughing and reconciled. Snow fell thickly outside, but inside the fireplace roared. Elise, bright and carefree in a red coat, chased Randolph, calling him Grandpa, filling the halls with silver bell laughter. Griffin stood nearby, humble and happy. I stood by the sparkling Christmas tree, watching them, feeling the past finally dissolve into the present joy. I realized true strength doesn't come from money or status, but from daring to stand when life tries to drown you. I was once a failure in Athena's eyes, a stain to Alia, but I rose again for Elise, for Randolph, and for myself. Family isn't just blood, it's love, loyalty, and protection. I survived the betrayal and the pain. I became Tyler Slade, CEO, father, and brother, ready for whatever the future held. If this story of pain, betrayal, and ultimate justice touched your heart, please subscribe to Bol, Предательство, Месть, and share your thoughts below on how one overcomes the deepest betrayals. Stay strong and never let others define your worth.